so welcome everyone to the West Coast Electric Fleets webinar. This is part of a webinar series that we've been doing for a little over a year now. Today's topic is electric vehicles and infrastructure in a municipal fleet. And we're specifically looking at the City of Seattle today on some of the innovations that they have done. I am Charlotte Argue, and I'm here with my coworker Ryan Davis, and we're both from the Fraser Basin Council, which is an organization that's a not-for-profit located in British Columbia. And we've been working on electric vehicles and green infrastructure for a while now. The mandate of Fraser Basin Council is to advance sustainability in British Columbia. But we're just one of a number of partners who work on the West Coast Electric Fleet project. So in addition to staff at the province of BC and the states of Oregon, Washington, and California, we also work with the organizations listed here as outreach partners for West Coast Electric Fleets. So West Coast Electric Fleets was launched a couple of years ago in support of the Pacific Coast Collaborative. This is an agreement between the province of BC and the states of Washington, Oregon, and California. And it was really around collaboration on a number of various issues, from climate and energy to the economy. Part of the Pacific Coast Collaborative has been a number of different agreements or action plans that the states and the province have signed. And one of those was the Pacific Coast Action Plan on Climate and Energy. So this plan was signed originally in 2008, and one of the key actions that was highlighted within it was an aim for an increase in electric vehicle uptake or zero-emission vehicle uptake in fleets. So really the purpose of the West Coast Electric Fleets was to support that goal and to provide an opportunity and support for fleets who are pursuing the use of zero-emission vehicles and expanding their operations with both electric and other zero-emission technologies. The purpose of West Coast Electric Fleets really is to connect fleets, provide a network for peer-to-peer learning, provide a bit of a hub for resources and tools to support them in their pursuit of increasing their zero-emission technologies. And we highlight some of the leading fleets in the area to provide case studies and really give an opportunity for you to learn from each other. So through West Coast Electric Fleets, fleets are encouraged to join the initiative by becoming a fleet partner. And to do so, we have a 4-tiered pledge commitment, which is free to join. There's 4 tiers to allow for different levels of commitment to zero-emission vehicles. So the first tier is on-ramp, which is simply committing to evaluate zero-emission vehicles as part of your fleet purchases. And then our highest level is now the diamond lane, which is committing to a percentage of zero-emission vehicles that's higher than 10%. And it's up to the fleets to determine what that percentage is. So again, it's free to sign the pledge, and this is really a way to just align fleets with similar goals and similar ambitions, but to recognize that not all organizations and companies are ready to go 100% electric, but there's some steps that they can take initially to start increasing the zero-emission vehicles in their fleet. So we currently have over 50 partner fleets that span from BC down to California, as you can see from the dots there. And this is a list of a number of those fleets who have signed on to the pledge. The range of fleets are for everything from state and provincial fleets to local government and municipalities, as well as private sector fleets, transit authorities, utilities, and other. So you can see a bit of a breakdown of our current fleet partners in this pie chart here. And it also represents a variety of sizes. So we have very large fleets and some fleets with only 1 or 2 vehicles. One of the resources that is offered through West Coast Electric Fleets is a toolkit. So we have the online website, westcoastelectricfleets.com. And on this toolkit, you can find a number of different resources, everything from case studies to past webinars. This webinar today is being recorded, and we'll be putting it up on the toolkit along with other past webinars that we've had. There's also reports and various tools. So yeah, you're encouraged to go and browse through the toolkit. One of the resources that we've done is we've taken a number of our partner fleets and written a little bit of a case study on them, just highlighting some of the initiatives that they've taken as well. So with that, I do encourage you, if you're not already a partner of West Coast Electric Fleets, to consider signing the pledge and exploring this toolkit. We also are always looking for other case studies, so if you're interested in becoming a case study, please connect with us. And we also have a newsletter that goes out every month or two with upcoming events and new information. So for today's webinar, we've done a little bit of a different setup today. Typically what we do is we have one or two presenters going through some slides and talking about what they've done. But this time we wanted to give a little bit of a visual context. So our partner at Ross Strategic worked with our two presenters ahead of time and recorded them at their sites. So we have a short video to play for you today. And then after the video, then we're going to pass it over to Andrea and Chris to talk a little bit about it, but we really want the questions to pour in. So please ask your questions, and we'll get a bit of a dialogue going. I'm going to pass the mic over to my coworker Ryan to introduce our speakers. And while I do, we just want to know who's in the room. So we're going to set up a poll at the same time. So please answer your poll. And Ryan, can you please introduce our speakers?
Yeah. Thanks, Charlotte. So the two speakers today, Andrea and Chris, are both from the city of Seattle. Andrea is the Green Fleet Program Manager for the city, working in the Fleet Management Division since 2011. In 2014, Andrea authored and published the city's updated Green Fleet Action Plan and managed a successful transition to biodiesel for over 1,000 fleet vehicles in 2015. Most recently, she was one of the leads in developing Mayor Ed Murray's Drive Clean Seattle initiative, which calls for a 50% reduction in fleet emissions by 2025. She is also working to expand electric vehicle infrastructure by installing over 400 charging stations at dozens of city locations over the next 4 years. Beyond the infrastructure deployment, she also spearheads policy and procurement efforts related to EVs and other alternative fuels on a regional, state, and national level. Prior to working in local government, Andrea worked in the private sector as an environmental chemist and project manager for 10 years and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Oceanography from the University of Washington in Seattle. Chris is a Climate and Transportation Policy Advisor for the Seattle Office of Sustainability and Environment. Chris is also the Program Manager for the Mayor's Drive Clean Seattle initiative and is the primary point of contact for the City of Seattle for anything to do with electric vehicles. Chris's professional history includes working on climate change and energy programs for both inside and outside government agencies. Before joining the City of Seattle, Chris was the Business Partners Manager at Climate Solutions, a regional clean energy economy advocacy organization in the Northwest. His government experience also includes 5 years working for the Commonwealth of Virginia on policy, energy, and environment initiatives in the Executive Office of Governor Tim Kaine and the State Energy Office. I'll hand it back over to Charlotte.
Thanks, Ryan. So we had the first poll was around what best describes your role, and we had quite a even breakdown between the policy and planning, fleet management, and environmental and sustainability. We just have another poll up right now around your charging infrastructure that you currently have for your fleet. So I'm going to close the poll, get your last minute votes in. Okay. So the majority of fleets have dedicated fleet charging without public access, but it looks like some also have public access. And several do not have electric vehicles in their fleet. Great. Okay, so we're going to launch the video now, and just bear with us here. Hey, thank you to Jimmy at Ross Strategic and Andrea and Chris for doing that video for this webinar. I think most of you were able to both hear and see the video, but I think there were a few people who either didn't have the pop-up video or had issues with the sound. So we do have the video up on the West Coast Electric Fleet website, so you can view that at a later time. But apologies if you were unable to hear that. So with that, we're going to unmute Andrea and Chris, who were both kind enough to join us today. And we'd like to start taking questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like them to go through, please start asking them via the question box. We have a few questions ahead of time that Ryan is going to go through with them as well. So Andrea and Chris, you should be unmuted now.
Hey everyone. So the first question to come in was around the DC fast charger for the city of Seattle. The question was, the RFID, was that a special request after the install, or was that something you knew you wanted beforehand? I think that's a question for Andrea.
Sure. That is definitely something I wanted beforehand. We had a limited experience with about 5 networked smart chargers where I was just managing 5 RFID cards, and it sounds ridiculous, but the cards get lost, the cards don't work, the cards, you know, all these things happen to the cards, and you have to register each one, and just the administrative burden of those 5 kind of spooked me a little bit as you look to scale this up. So when we were discussing the DC fast charge donation with Nissan and BTC, I asked, is there a different option besides the RFID? Because it's RFID capable as well. And they said, you sure, there's like a PIN code you can use, and it's kind of cool. It's in this hidden area of the screen. You have to like press a certain area of the screen to even have that pop up. So yeah, it was really helpful, but it's definitely something we wanted to do beforehand.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if folks could hear all of that. So the question was around battery degradation on the Nissan Leafs that are available in the city of Seattle's fleet. What has that been like over time? And Nissan's non-temperature controlled battery pack tends to not do well over time, from what this person can tell.
I'm really glad you asked that question. Our batteries have actually held up very well. We have partnered with the Idaho National Laboratory since 2012 to come out and test our batteries, us along with King County vehicles. And in the last round of testing that was done in December of 2016, all of the Leafs that were tested, which was 10 of them, have between 90 and 95% state of health of the battery after 5 years. And we're going to keep our EVs for 10 years, so we do not anticipate battery degradation to be a significant issue. And the other thing I wanted to note is it's my understanding that Nissan does have a heater on the battery, and sometimes that can affect the range in cold temperatures if the car isn't plugged in. So for instance, I have a Leaf at home. Over the winter, it's been very cold in Seattle, and when if I'm getting out of the car in the evening and I don't plug it in, I might have a range of 70, and I'll come back out the next day and it might be 67 or 50 to 65 miles. So there is a tiny bit of loss due to that, the battery heater. But I don't know if that is specific to certain model years, but I have a 2015 Leaf, so hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Next question, going to open it up to both you, Chris and Andrea, concerning the VW settlement. What is the timeline for knowing what that settlement, the funds are going to be geared towards?
So I'll take that one. We've been very interested in trying to figure that out ourselves. We are focused on 2 aspects of the VW settlement as it applies to both our own electric fleet and electric fleet infrastructure, but also just trying to get more transportation electrification here in the city and in the region. So the 2 parts, as I think most people probably know. One is the State Mitigation Fund, and so states across the country were given an allocation of funding to mitigate the harmful diesel pollution that happened, and the consent decree outlines like 8 or 9 different buckets that money can be used for, and then each state has their own process for figuring out how they want to spend that money, and sort of goes through a legal process and review for getting that final approval. And so everybody here in Washington has been trying to figure out how the best way to influence that process is, and what the best way to allocate those funds. And as I mentioned, that's focused mostly on diesel mitigation, and so we're looking at how we can potentially use that funding to support the electrification of some of our heavier duty uses. You know, passenger sedans aren't hard anymore. We've got supply. We just need to figure out how to get the infrastructure in, and we can buy those vehicles. The next generation of electrification, the medium and heavy duty uses, that's where we got to spend some time and attention and figure out how we're going to pay for it. And so the mitigation funds can help with that significantly. The other bucket of money is the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Investment Fund that Volkswagen is administering itself. And that's been more of kind of a black box, kind of a opaque process that has just recently become a little bit more clear. And we're not really sure on the timing for that. That's I do know that Volkswagen is interested in spending a lot of this first 30-month period of funding, spending a lot of that on highway corridor charging, and then going deeper in some municipalities. So we're hopeful that that means being able to get some robust charging infrastructure in Seattle, both for our fleet and for the general public. And we're going through that and trying to figure out how we can find more information ourselves. So if anybody else has any information, we're happy to talk about it offline.
Great, thanks. So a couple follow-up questions concerning the batteries. One comment from the participant, they use GPS devices specific for EVs that track the battery degradation, and they've seen about a 1 to 4% degradation over 2 years, which they account as pretty minimal. A question, however, from the audience is, how often are you testing those batteries?
For Seattle, we unfortunately don't have those telematics quite yet. I think you might be talking about Fleet Karma. We're working to get our EVs outfitted with something like that, because something that's should be noted for infrastructure is, you really need to be able to quantify how much electricity those cars are using for several reasons, and data loggers like that can do that, and then also offer you battery health questions. But can you remind me again what the question was? Sorry, I got a little sidetracked.
It was around how often are you testing those batteries?
Oh, right. Okay, so Idaho National Lab has been coming out once a year to test the batteries with the Nissan diagnostic tool, which is a more robust analysis than I think you're going to get from telematics. But it has been once a year since 2012, so about 4 times, I believe.
Great, thanks. Just that was a quick little video of Charlotte, just so you guys can actually know what she looks like. So
no, it was accidental. It wasn't intentional.
So a follow-up question concerning that DCFC. Was the DCFC the only donated piece, or did it also cover the cost of installing the panels? And then attached to that question is, what was the site assessment issues like as far as the power available for that DCFC and where you could locate it in the city?
Yes, so the donation only covered the equipment only, which was about $30,000. The installation, we just happened to kind of luck out. We used to have a CNG station at that location, so there was already a good amount of power going to that, so we didn't have to do any upgrades. We installed it for, I believe, $25,000, you know, with all the applicable permits. But the good news is there's enough power to actually install another one. So they stubbed that out already. And so if we need, you know, as the fleet grows, talking about scalability, Nissan is probably willing to donate us another one if we order more vehicles. And when that happens, we can just plop it right down where that is. But I probably would have gotten another one, but you know, there's always strings attached to some free, and they wanted it in within like months. And internally, sometimes that's an unrealistic time frame. And so at the other location that I was looking at installing it, there's going to need to be some more electrical work done, so it wasn't going to be an easy of a lift. But you know, we're not really putting people in vehicles that require a fast charge during their normal duty cycle. It's kind of like an ancillary, you know, if you're out and about, you need an additional charge, it's there for you. But in terms of just utilizing that charger as like the only way to charge the vehicles, that's not really the route that we're going. But I will look to expand our DC fast chargers as we scale up EVs in our fleet.
So you mentioned that Nissan might be willing to donate an additional station. What do you think that magic number is as far as the number of Nissan Leafs that you would need to order in order to get that fast charger?
Well, a couple years ago, a Nissan representative gave a presentation at the ACT Expo in LA, and their PowerPoint said 10. So I don't know if that's still valid, but I think that's a good number to shoot for. If you get 10 or more, ask.
Did you take a photo of that slide?
Unfortunately, I did not. But it was from David Peterson, who now works for ChargePoint, so maybe if you ask him real nicely, he might still have that somewhere.
And question around the level 2 charging. If there's no level 2 charging that exists in the area, does your fleet rely on level 1?
Yes. Yes, that is correct, because when you start like looking into panels, you know, some buildings have excess capacity and installing level 2s is no problem. Some buildings have zero capacity and you might be able to squeeze out an outlet. And so in that case, we would probably get a PHEV and just have one outlet dedicated to that. And it should be noted that I believe the specifications for even a level 1 is that it's a dedicated circuit at the panel. So you need a 15 or 20 amp dedicated circuit even for an outlet. But I just think being flexible with kind of, you know, the parameters that you're given, you don't have to build Rome in a day. You know, if one building only has 2 outlets available, then instead of BEVs, maybe you get PHEVs for those and kind of work on a longer term strategy to do a bigger upgrade at a later time. That's kind of how we've been handling it.
You know, and I'll just add to that and say one thing that I think is important from our perspective is, as you can tell, Andrea has a lot of experience and knowledge and has developed significant expertise around this in terms of going through this experience as the city. And so we're really serious about leading by example. And so whether it's our experience, you know, with drivers or what we're seeing more lately is our experience with installing infrastructure in a building, significant amounts of infrastructure in a building. You know, we can play a role of you know, doing some truth testing and some ground truthing of our codes to make sure that they are robust enough to support a significant infrastructure install. You know, we're not just talking about putting in 2 or 3 chargers in a building. We're putting in a couple hundred, and so that type of experience helps us help the city as we go through our own building boom here in Seattle to make sure that we are setting up the policy and the infrastructure guidelines to support some of our pretty aggressive EV goals.
Yeah, actually that feeds right into the next question around those long-term costs and whether or not you include demand charges or things that like for your return on investment when calculating the life cycle cost of the vehicle?
Well, it's pretty hard to anticipate, you know, like a time of use. First of all, we don't have time of use rates in Seattle. And second, it's hard to figure out if you're going to hit demand charges or not. And so what I've been doing is for our existing 33 leafs in the SMT, what that you saw in the video, I've been tracking kind of the kilowatt hour consumption and our cost for that, because I get the utility bills for those meters. And it's been really steady and consistent, and between 8 and 9 cents a kilowatt hour. And maybe some of my friends from California on the line are cringing at that, but so, you know, I think come up with an estimate and work from there. And there was one question that we got yesterday, and I think it's important to hit on this, especially for the fleet managers in the group, is you know, how do you account for charging infrastructure when you're purchasing a new vehicle if there's no level 2 chargers pre-existing? Including a charging station in the cost of a new vehicle can really, you know, determine its cost effectiveness or the cost benefit. And I just want to throw out there that it's my philosophy that maybe the charging station itself can be capitalized with the vehicle, but that's about $500 if you're getting a dumb charger. But the electrical infrastructure going up to that charging station, that is a capital upgrade to your facility, and that should not be attributed to a vehicle in my mind. It's kind of like for a gas station, right? If you had to build a gas station for a fleet of vehicles, would you include the cost of that gas station with the first vehicles that fueled up there? And the answer most times is no. So I just wanted to touch on that for the fleet managers on the phone as we're all trying to grapple of how do you pay for this. For any municipalities out there, I would suggest looking at REIT funding, which is the real estate excise tax. There's a tax that's collected when real estate deals are done, and that money is set aside for capital projects for cities. And we have successfully leveraged some of that funding for our bigger projects, and so that's an option that people can think about.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And attached to the cost, what have you seen the maintenance cost to be for these electric vehicles over the course of the past few years?
Okay, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe, off the top of my head, the total cost of ownership for an EV is about 40% less than an internal combustion engine, and I believe about 20% less than a hybrid. And so on maintenance, and I have some data I can share on this, but
just clarify real quick. What's the what are you calculating that cost reduction on based number of years?
10 years is our life cycle for sedans. And so just in terms of maintenance costs, though, because I think, you know, electricity rates vary across the country, and so when you're doing TCO, you're talking about everything. But just in terms of maintenance costs, EVs are the cheapest that we've seen, according to our data. Internal combustion engines are the highest, followed by hybrids, and then EVs are the cheapest.
Another question that just came in. Have you guys looked at medium and heavy duty electric vehicles for your fleet? And if so, which models?
Yeah, so I am jealous of California because I think they have a couple more options down there. But we just recently viewed an Odyne system. I think it's on a Class 6 like bucket truck. That looks really cool. It has a battery pack that you plug in with a J1772 plug. And then a GEM aerial system. We just purchased one of those, and it can be charged on an outlet, so I just had one of those installed. I saw an article recently about PG&E getting a plug-in, was it Class 6? I can't remember, from EDI, Efficient Drive Trains Incorporated. So I'm interested to see kind of what their offerings are, but we're definitely keeping our eye out on what's coming out. It seems like there's several models that are about to come out, but we're just trying to look at the ones that we have access to right now, which has been Odyne and GEM.
Yeah, just
you know, I think that.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, I was just going to say I think that other cities on the call might be familiar with this, but we also were part of the initial group of 4 cities here on the West Coast who launched the EV RFI, which is an effort led by Los Angeles, and many other cities have now signed on to demonstrate the purchasing power and aggregate demand of municipal governments when it comes to buying vehicles. Specifically for us, our interest was in demonstrating to automakers that we're ready to buy these, the SUVs and the pickup trucks and the step vans and, the next class of trucks and vehicles. And it's been extraordinarily successful in terms of automaker interest and other cities joining on, and really, I think, helping our residents, our employees, and automakers, and then other policymakers to know that, the urgency, for us at least, the urgency of the climate challenge is continues to be real and in our face, and we're not going to stop taking action on it, even if, the national governments start to slow down. And so that's our role as cities. And we think that vehicles, and I'm really glad you asked the question about sort of heavier duty vehicles, are a good place for us to put a stake in the ground and say, here's one real concrete action that we're going to do. And it gives us something to tie a bow around and say, hey, this is what action on climate looks like.
Great, yeah. So a couple follow-up questions regarding the cost of those electric vehicles. You mentioned that a 40% decrease compared to ICE vehicles, but what has been the single greatest cost as far as maintenance goes of those electric cars?
I think our maintenance costs, I kind of cringe when people ask me for this data, because I feel like some of our internal business processes have inflated that, even though they've come out to be less. But there's no oil changes on the vehicles, and for several years we kind of maintained them like an ICE, same checklist, same PM frequency. And here at the city we want to touch our cars every year just for safety inspections. But when I looked at the maintenance data, I'm going to be honest with you, is that I saw a lot of flat tires, and that could either be from people not driving them, or the tires are pretty thin on an EV. And then there was also a lot of cracked windshields, and I don't know if that's the same story of they might be a little thinner, or if that's just the nature of Seattle, driving around in Seattle behind all these construction equipment. But that's been pretty much it. And sometimes, like if the cars aren't used for very long, or they sit there, like someone goes on vacation for 2 weeks and it's sitting there plugged in for several weeks and not used, it can drain the battery. And we've had to tow it to the dealership to figure out what was going on with it. And those isolated incidents have been very expensive, but in terms of overall maintenance, they've been pretty great.
Great. So kind of a different question, this one around training city personnel on how to operate and manage an electric car used as a pool vehicle when you don't know who will be using it in any given day.
Yeah, so early on in 2010, we made a video that kind of just, this was when EVs were brand new and they were very different than what people had experienced. And we made a little training video, and we required that as training before someone could check out a car. And we have like a very robust system where it's easy to do something like that. But I mean, you can even take less technical approaches. We put handbooks in our vehicles. And we have some information on our internal fleet website, but I do think just a training video is good. Something that we did when we first launched the EVs was we had a leaf rodeo where people, I didn't work here at the time, I just heard funny stories about it. We baked cookies, people came down, they got in them, they could see how they turn them on, because like the gear shift in the Leaf is very different than a normal car, and so than a traditional ICE car, I should say. So it was just kind of getting people familiar with it, and actually the same thing happened, I guess, when we introduced hybrids into the fleet. Like people were seriously freaked out about them because they drove a little differently and there was some nuances, but with time that helps. But I think a training video, manuals, websites, and then just maybe going out and training in person, a group of 10 to 15 people at a time might work depending on the size of your agencies. But that's been very helpful for us.
Great. So another question, jumping back to electric pickup trucks, what options have you looked at? And for example, there was a recent announcement by Workhorse, if you've seen that or not.
Yes, we have seen the presentations from Workhorse and from XL Hybrids, who is working on a PHEV F-150, which for our fleet would be more applicable since we have a ton of Fords and we're a Ford warranty shop. I think the Workhorse option is intriguing. It's a little bit more expensive and it's still in the design phase, which makes me a little nervous in terms of production schedule. I don't know if everybody remembers VIA, but you know, for our fleet personally, I think the plug-in F-150 is probably going to be a better near-term, more cost-effective option. And keeping my eyes peeled for what's coming next. I would like a small, compact truck would be great. Not all, you know, half-ton trucks. But we'll see.
Thanks. So another question related to the number of electric vehicles in your fleet. Have you seen an uptick or know of any City of Seattle employees who have gone out and purchased an electric car for personal use?
Oh, yes.
She did.
I did. And I'll just speak a little bit on this, and then I'll let Chris kind of talk about the broader implications of, you know, Nissan ad campaigns and whatnot. But early on, Nissan had offered an employee discount for City of Seattle, and I guess it was wildly popular, especially with the firefighters for some reason, because all of a sudden all these leafs started popping up at our fire stations, and there was extension cords everywhere, and our facilities people freaked out. But from what I understand, it has been pretty successful, and I am one of those people that went out and bought a leaf with my little discount, and it was great driving a brand new car for the first time in my life, and it's turned out to be a really great car. So that's my personal antidote. I'll let Chris talk about the policy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't have too much to add other than, you know, the theory there. I think we see play out both in fleet vehicles and also when folks have the opportunity to drive an electric car share vehicle, that just getting butts in seats is a great way to introduce people to EVs. You know, like on and around some of the training that we did back before our time when we first introduced EVs to our fleet, having that experience just makes folks more comfortable. And so I don't know if, you know, I don't think we've done any surveys to understand if employee EV purchases have been the result of the experience driving a fleet EV or whether it's because of the discount offered. I know that the policy analyst who works in the mayor's policy office who works on this program with us just recently bought a used EV, I think because of all of the work that she's doing in the space right now. And so, you know, one thing that I will mention just from a policy perspective, I think that what Andrea was teeing me up for is when it comes to commuters, it's, you know, it's an interesting question for us. We obviously have a priority around electrification of our municipal fleet, but we want people taking the bus to work. And we want people, you know, not driving as much as possible and taking other means of transportation besides a single occupancy vehicle. And so, you know, when it comes to promoting personal vehicle ownership, it's a tricky situation for us, whether it's this type of sort of discount for city employees around purchasing an EV or whether it's workplace charging. Those are really tough questions that we have to figure out. How do we balance that with the other priorities that we have around transportation pollution and really our transportation network as a whole? And so, you know, firefighters are a great example because their work is not on peak commute times and it's distributed around, you know, the stations are distributed around the city and it's not in a central location. So it's an interesting example, but I think it is an important point to raise.
Great. So two questions around the EV charging stations. One, what has the maintenance on those charging stations been like? What issues have come up? What's the cost of the maintenance? And what is the length of life you've seen on some of those stations? And then as a follow-up, what brand of level 2 chargers, both dumb and smart, do you utilize?
So when we first installed the first batch, they were Eaton chargers, and it was part of the grant requirements that we had to report back. And so there was some brains that were put on those, and we communicated back, but you know, they were dumb chargers. And since then, We have kind of made a decision to use non-network chargers where we can because it's most cost-effective, there's less to break on them, and I will go ahead and say that all of our dumb chargers have had 0 maintenance in the past 5 years. So it's been really great, and you know, we were wrestling with, do we go ahead and get a service contract just in case, because we're not really set up, you know, internally to kind of fix these all the time. And what I decided was we started using Clipper Creek, and there is a ruggedized version of some of their popular models which comes with a 5-year warranty, and the charging stations are $600. So what we're doing, we're planning to replace the charging station box with the vehicle every 10 years, and if it's still working at the end of that 10 years, we'll keep it, but just to kind of for budgetary purposes. And so at this point, I'm kind of hedging my bets and taking the risk that, you know, given our 5 years of experience with 0 maintenance and this new 5-year warranty, that if anything did happen, it would either be under warranty or it'd be $600 to replace it with a new one. And we have switched out some of our network chargers for dumb chargers. I know that sounds silly, and that cost about $300 a piece to just switch out the box. So I hope that's helpful. And did I hit on all the answers there?
Yeah, actually, yeah, you raised a couple of other really great questions. So just to clarify first, so Clipper Creek in Canada, that's Sun Country Highway. But back to the charging station questions, how are you monitoring the kilowatt usage if you are utilizing those dumb stations?
Well, going forward, we will be putting in sub-meters between the panel and all of the charging stations, because I don't really need to see it on a charging station level. I just want to know how much kilowatt hours are going to charging stations. And so what I have done with the leafs that are in our motor pool is I have collected the kilowatt hour data from the utility bills that we get and looked at the aggregate mileage of those cars over that period of time to come up with a kilowatt per mile ratio, and that ratio has been very consistent over the past 3 or 4 years. And so for other vehicles that might not be separately metered now, I just go ahead and extrapolate that ratio based on mileage. So it gives you an idea of kilowatt hour consumption. Ideally, I'd like to do it at the vehicle level. Because if you think about it, cars can charge outside of their home charging station, and if you're doing it at the charging station level, you miss any other, you know, opportunity charging they might be doing. But you know, ideally, I would use like a Fleet Karma. But in the meantime, you can also use a sub-meter, which you can get for about $600. So when they're installing the charging stations, I ask them to put either a junction box or a sub-meter in between the main conduit raceway coming from the panel that goes to all of the charging stations.
You know, this topic has interesting implications too for cities if you're thinking about building benchmarking ordinances or other ways that buildings are required to reduce their energy use, understanding the difference between good load of EV charging and how you can make sure that building owners who are under any type of voluntary or mandatory requirement to reduce their energy use, make sure that the EVs that are plugged in there aren't sort of penalizing them for that.
Great, thanks, Chris. So we have room for 2 more questions, both related to the charging stations again. The first is, what's the main reason or issue you were having with those network stations, and actually, that's just it. Last question. What was the main reason for switching out from the network?
Yeah, so when you start putting a lot of these in parking garages, it becomes an issue because the cell service, you need to get repeaters, and even then sometimes it can be a little sketchy. The reason that I stopped using network chargers is just because they're so much more expensive, and then they have that ongoing cost, which is an operating and maintenance cost that we're not really budgeted for at scale. So I'm really just trying to do this in a smart way, and I think network chargers are great for public use, or if you're collecting money, or if you need to manage them in real time and you can't, you know, feasibly go there in an hour or so. But for us, so far, they just haven't been worth the cost. And there's, you know, the more bells and whistles they have, the more opportunity there are for things to go wrong. And one of our chargers wasn't working, and I called, you know, the customer service hotline, and they go, oh, well, you just need to go flip the breaker. I'm like, okay. So I did, but I'm thinking, is that what I've been paying for this whole time? But anyways, so I'm just speaking from personal experience. You know, other people might have other, you know, feelings about this, but I do think, you know, they might work in a situation where it's not behind the fence, it's open to the public. You might want to share them, you know, during the day, and in that case, network chargers would be great.
Thanks. So that's all the questions that we have time for today. There are many that didn't get answered. I'll try to reach out to Chris and Andrea and see if we can't get some of those unanswered questions answered, and we'll share those with the participants for today. Want to thank both you, Chris and Andrea, for taking the time and sharing some of your knowledge with us. For folks that are in the West Coast area, there's two upcoming events we wanted to highlight. The first is the Vancouver International Auto Show with some EV test drives. That's coming up late March. And then mid-April, there's the Green Transportation Summit and Expo down in Portland. There's also opportunities there to take a look at different alternative fuel vehicles, both medium and heavy duty, and also a test drive of sorts going there. So that's it for today. This webinar has been recorded. We will be uploading it to the West Coast Electric Fleet site and sending out email notifying everyone of that. Thank you for your time, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.